Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking the Istanbul Foundation for Research and Education for organizing this very important conference. Thank you for your generous hospitality and your kind invitation to present my research. My paper this afternoon seeks to address the following question. What is the place of Ottoman tafsir within the larger tafsir tradition? If one examines English, French, and German language scholarship, one gains the impression that Ottoman tafsir was of negligible importance. Goldziher, for example, in his pioneering study, The Schools of Quranic Interpretation, appears not to list a single author from the entire Ottoman tafsir tradition. Andrew Rippon, one of the most prominent Western scholars of tafsir, lists no Ottoman figures in the approximately 50 commentators he surveys for his article in the second edition of the Encyclopedia of Islam. The French scholar Claude Gilliot, in his survey for the Encyclopedia of the Quran, identifies more than 100 important commentators from Islamic history, yet he cites only 3 Ottoman exegetes. These are An-Naqshbandi, Ismail Haqqi, and Abu Thana al-Alusi. Gilliot does not even mention Abu Sa'ud Effendi. This omission of Abu Sa'ud is striking. Many Ottoman scholars, and biographers of his many Ottoman scholars regarded his as one of the 3 greatest ever written. This perception that Ottoman Quran commentary was of little importance can also be seen in the record of European language publications. Many of you may already be familiar with the periodical indexing service, Index Islamicus, which indexes more than 585,000 European language academic articles, books, book reviews, and conference proceedings in the field of Islamic studies. And I'd like to make a little side comment here. There's a bit of a problem. I don't know if it's a political issue. If you look at the description, it says, Index Islamicus Online is the, capital T-H-E, international classified bibliography of publications in European languages. There seems to be debate happening here. Is Turkish a European language? Because you will not find Turkish language materials in here. Now, I don't know if this is, if Turkey joins the EU, will they change? I don't know. There's a big debate about that, I suppose. But needless to say, this is a major omission from this indexing service. To give you a few examples, some of you might recognize this famous work, in the history of tafsir. If you search for it, it's not there. That's rather odd. If you search, for example, tafsir with the particular transliteration that you find in the Turkish language, I find one article, and if you look carefully, it's from Sarajevo. So it's, again, not Turkish language here. So this is a major problem, and I would strongly encourage you and other academic organizations to approach Index Islamicus on this, as Turkish language scholarship is extremely important and increasingly important for Islamic studies, as you all know. But to return to our topic, despite Index Islamicus's comprehensiveness, even in Western European languages, it only lists, for example, one study of Abu Sa'ud's tafsir, a single article by Shuruq Naguib. It similarly lists only one study of al-Alusi's 30-volume tafsir, Ruh al-Ma'ani, which is a single article by Bashir Nafi'. It has no studies at all of An-Naqshbandi or Ismail Haqqi. Yet, at the same time, Index Islamicus has a comparative abundance of studies on earlier commentators. If you look up a figure like a Tabari or a Razi, you can find book-length studies and more than 40 academic articles for each of them. So there's Naqshbandi, you can see nothing found. If I type in Tabari and Tafsir, I have 44 results, including a book as the first entry, many articles following that. These results, at least from the Western academic or Western European academic tradition, are not a strong vote of confidence in the Ottoman tafsir tradition, which we're going to problematize in a little bit. Arabic language histories of tafsir tend to give a similar, if slightly more positive assessment. Muhammad al-Dhahabi lists more than 50 commentators in his widely read At-Tafsir wal-Mufassirun. Yet I was only able to identify 5 commentators in his work who lived in Ottoman lands. In addition to An-Naqshbandi, Ismail Haqqi, and al-Alusi, who were captured by Gilliot, al-Dhahabi adds Abu Abdullah al-Khurubi, died in 963-1555, and the aforementioned Abu Sa'ud. Even though the Ottoman Empire ruled for nearly half of Islamic history, for al-Dhahabi, it produced only about 10% of important Quran commentaries. What are we to make of this pessimistic view of Ottoman tafsir that emerges from such surveys? Do such surveys accurately capture the history of the tafsir tradition? Unfortunately, since I do not know Turkish, though it's a language I would love to learn, it is difficult for me to evaluate how Turkish scholarship has regarded Ottoman tafsir. I would assume that it tells a more optimistic story, a story that would enrich our academic discussions if more widely known. In the remainder of my paper, I would like to address the overall place of the Ottoman tafsir tradition through an examination of 3 issues. First, what are the historiographical challenges we confront when studying Ottoman tafsir that should give us pause before accepting this pessimistic view? Second, what are the European and Arabic language scholarly prejudices that may distort our perception of Ottoman tafsir? And third, I would like to propose a new method for assessing the place of Ottoman tafsir, and that would be through, and also provide an initial blueprint for studying this vastly understudied period using manuscript catalogs and codicology. So first issue, the historiographical challenges in the study of tafsir. Unfortunately, the historiographical challenges facing historians of tafsir are numerous. The most important scholar of these issues that I know of is Walid Saleh at the University of Toronto, so I will be channeling much of him today. First, as noted in a number of studies by Saleh, we still lack a comprehensive and accurate inventory of surviving tafsir works in manuscript form. This makes it difficult to write a history of tafsir. Our best Union catalog to date is this work, produced in Jordan, فهرس الشامل للتراث العربي الإسلامي المخطوط, which was compiled by the Jordanian government's research institute, Al-Majma' al-Maliki lil-Buhuth al-Hadara al-Islamiyya in the 1980s. It's a remarkable catalog that combines the contents of hundreds of individual catalogs, and it's actually, it's amazing. If you look at the list of catalogs they merged together, the list is more than 100 pages, for those of you who may not be familiar with the work. It is a remarkable achievement and an indispensable research tool in the field, yet it remains incomplete, for the catalog leaves out an unknown number of commentaries. I have not studied this issue in depth, but I have found examples of manuscripts in Turkish libraries that it is missing. For example, Abu Nasr al-Haddadi's Ma'ani Kitab Allah Ta'ala wa Tafsiruhu al-Munir is stored in the Topkapi Saray Museum, yet it does not appear in the Fihris. In some instances, the Fihris knows only a subset of extant copies. The Fihris lists only a single copy of the Tafsir of Shamsuddin al-Daylami, which was studied by my colleague Peter Coppens, who spoke yesterday. Yet we know of at least 5 copies, all in Turkish libraries, and under 2 different titles. We need additional work to determine the full level of completeness of the catalog, but for our purposes today, this is especially relevant for works in Turkey. Make a quick side comment here. Some of you may have heard about this initiative. I learned about it yesterday. It's very exciting. The University of Leipzig, here, and the Saxon University of Sciences recently announced, and typically, I don't want to make any comments here, but a 17-year project, which is amazing to me as an American, because in America we don't do projects that long. From 2018 to 2035, they have funding to create a union catalog of Arabic manuscripts from 1150 to 1850. This catalog would have a searchable front-end web interface, and it sounds like a very promising development for the study of Ottoman tafsir. So that's something to watch out for. It will probably replace the Fihris, I hope. The second challenge we face is that the surviving works that have been cataloged are often many volumes in length and overwhelming in number, making it difficult to assess the entire tradition. The Fihris lists approximately 1,200 unique authors whose commentaries have survived in manuscript. This far exceeds the approximately 130 authors listed by Gilliot in his important survey. The fact that for every title Gilliot mentions, we possess nearly another 10 should also give us pause regarding any generalizations, explicit or implicit, in European language quote-unquote scholarship. Third, regrettably, most of the tafsir works listed in the Fihris remain in manuscript, unedited, and by consequence, difficult for scholars to access. To take but one example, to my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the widely popular Ottoman tafsir of Sa'adullah Effendi, whom I will discuss later, remains in manuscript. Fourth, before we assume that what has already been described in scholarship are the most important works of tafsir, we should remember 2 facts. First, many important works continue to be edited, so our body of materials remains incomplete. As Saleh notes, the commentaries of Atha'labi and Al-Maturidi were only recently edited in 2002 and 2005. Both of these are very important works, and we had a talk scheduled just this morning on the missing link, Al-Maturidi's influence on Ottoman tafsir. The fact that we are still editing important work should also give us pause before accepting this pessimistic scholarly narrative. A second reason to be suspicious is that, as again noted by Saleh, historians of tafsir rely heavily upon edited works for our scholarship. As a result, our judgments are conditioned by editors' decisions about which works to publish. But many editors make editorial decisions not with the need of historians in mind, but for ideological or for financial reasons. The corpus of tafsir thus comes to us pre-filtered. One example is the very early Quran commentary of Muqatil ibn Sulaiman, whose tafsir was slow to be edited due to the objections of Azhar. Sufi commentators have also been neglected, and I find this survey sort of funny. Are Sufis Muslim? According to the Middle East and North Africa, half say yes. Now, that must influence tafsir editing. If there's a 50% chance that your editor does not regard Sufis as Muslims, then if you have a large number of Sufi Quran commentaries, are they going to be edited? Probably not. And that's very relevant for the Ottoman context. Given the importance of Sufism in the Ottoman context, finally, and very importantly for our purposes, editors have shown relatively little interest in editing super commentaries, hawashi. Because so many Ottoman tafsir works took the form of hashiyas, we are extremely limited in our ability to assess the tradition. So that's the first issue, historiographical challenges. Number two, prejudices. In addition to these historical challenges, two scholarly prejudices may have also distorted our understanding of Ottoman tafsir. The first is the thesis that Islamic civilization declined during part or even all of Ottoman rule. Scholars have given various dates for the onset of this decline. Some placed it as early as the Mongol conquests, using their sack of Baghdad in 1258 as a convenient moment to begin their periodization. Others dated it later, to the death of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566. This decline was theorized to embrace all spheres of activity, from military strength and political stability to artistic creativity and intellectual vigor. Ottoman ulama were assumed to be, in the words of Khalid al-Ruwaihab, moribund and stagnant. As the empire weakened, the Arab provinces were thought to be increasingly isolated and prone to fanaticism. Advocates for the decline thesis included not only European and American Ottomanists studying the Ottoman Empire, but also some of the Ottoman sources that they read. And in the European and American context, this was quite widespread as a view until the 1970s. Arab intellectuals also postulated a dark age, from the Mongol conquest to the 19th century Arab Renaissance, the Nahda. And many Muslim reformers likewise argued that there had been a dark age of unthinking taqlid and deviant popular religious practices until the reformers reawakened the ummah in the 18th and 19th centuries. And to give one example, Andrew Rippin, that's maybe an indirect manifestation. Andrew Rippin lists not a single commentator in his survey for the 400-year period after As-Suyuti's death in 1505 until the 20th century. He basically goes Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Kathir, Suyuti, Abdu. What happened in between? Now, the Western study of tafsir is very indebted to Rippin's work, so I'm not trying to, I'm indebted to him myself. So I want to say in Rippin's defense that it would have been very hard to tell a story other than what he wrote. If we imagine ourselves in his shoes, tasked with writing a summary of the genre of tafsir for the encyclopedia, could we have done differently? How can one write an historical narrative that includes the Ottomans when, as we have seen, there are virtually no Western academic studies of Ottoman tafsirs to draw upon? The second scholarly prejudice that should give us pause before accepting the pessimistic view of Ottoman tafsir is the belief that the hawashi are unoriginal and pedantic works. They are therefore not worthy of our study. Krenko described the hashia of Khafaji, for example, like this, quote, "It follows the usual tedious method of explaining almost every word and of reproducing the statements of a large number of other authors who have treated upon the same subject." Many Arab historians of tafsir also took a dim view of the hawashi. For Adh-Dhahabi, the fact that scholars wrote more than 40 hashiyas on the tafsir of Baydawi indicates that Baydawi was a great scholar, but Adh-Dhahabi does not give the impression that these hawashis might be valuable in their own right. He mentions the name of a few of the most famous super commentaries in a single sentence, and then alerts his reader that he won't waste the space by mentioning them. La utilu bi dhikriha. To my knowledge, nowhere in his 3-volume survey does he examine them. Because so many Ottoman tafsirs took the form of hashiyas, such tafsirs have been effectively excluded from the history of the genre. Now, as many of you know, over the past few decades, historians working in diverse subfields have challenged both of these prejudices. I would particularly direct your attention to the scholarship of Khalid al-Ruwayhib at Harvard, and these scholars have done so theoretically and empirically. Regarding the thesis of decline, historians have noted the conceptual problems with analogizing the Ottoman Empire to a living organism, the so-called sick man of Europe. Empires are abstract political entities, not life forms. They are not entities that have oxidative processes that make it age and decrease the telomere length on their DNA and things like this. At the empirical level, historians have argued that the increasing difference between the Ottomans and the Europeans in strength during the early modern period might not indicate an Ottoman decline in absolute terms, but rather simply a slower rate of growth than Europe. Intellectual historians have noted evidence contrary to the model of decline. Al-Ruwayhib notes, for example, the dramatic rise of Ottoman madrasas during the second half of the 17th century and first few decades of the 18th. Regarding the value of hawashi, scholars such as Walid Saleh, Khalid al-Ruwayhib, Thomas Bauer, and Robert Wisnowski have argued that the genres of commentaries and super-commentaries are vastly underappreciated. As Saleh notes, because the gloss, the hashia, became a standard genre in the period, it became a place where original research was conducted. Indeed, contrary to the thesis that hawashi are marginal, no pun intended, sorry, according to historians like Muhammad al-Fadl ibn Ashur, the glosses on Baydawi's Tefsir represent the apogee, the peak of the genre. The fact that scholars are now challenging both of these prejudices does not, however, resolve the problematic lack of European and Arabic language scholarship on Ottoman Tefsir. The field suffers from nearly a century of neglect, which cannot be fixed overnight. One important solution is conferences like this one. And I hope that my colleagues in America and Europe will more deeply engage with your scholarship, and as I said, I have colleagues from Europe and America here, I believe, that is better informed about Ottoman Tafsir. So for the final portion of my talk, I would like to propose a method for assessing Ottoman Tafsir, and it's to use the aforementioned Fihras al-Shamil to identify the most popular works in the Tafsir tradition. Now there are many ways of assessing a commentator's historical popularity. One method, explored by Walid Saleh, is to examine contemporaneous assessments, such as lists of glosses on Zamakhshari's Kashaf that were studied in Ottoman madrasas. A second is to take advantage of a remarkable piece of data. Actually, I should have a little graphic here. I'll just mention this. I'm off my slides here. This is a cheesy way of representing the filtering process. You see all the manuscripts on the left, they get filtered, and we have a smaller subset. That's an earlier graphic. Forgive me, a little cheesy there. As you can see, it's been reduced. Okay, this is what I was getting at. So Walid Saleh makes his offhanded comment. He says, the large number of excellent manuscripts of al-Baghawi's commentary, which, thanks to a Fihras al-Shamil, we can have a rough measure of, clearly indicates that it was a very popular commentary. Because the Fihras lists all of the known copies of a work in the catalog it surveys, this means you can use the total number of manuscripts that we possess as an approximate measure, an approximate index of a work's popularity, and then you can compare one work with another. So working with a team of students at Yale University, where I did my graduate work, and now at Texas Christian University, we made a database of important fields, such as authors, titles, the number of surviving manuscript copies, and the length of each work. And if you count the total number of authors by century, you discover a few interesting things. This is the number of authors per century, people who wrote tafsirs. When is the majority of tafsir production? You can see it's in the Ottoman period. That's very significant. More importantly, however, we sorted the database from works with the most copies to the least copies to get a crude estimate of what were the most popular tafsir works in Islamic history. And we made a top 50 list. This is sort of the top 4%, which you can see here. And what I've done is, every line that's highlighted is an Ottoman work. And so if you look through the list, this is the first 14, the next set, and the final set. About 20% of the most popular works, according to manuscript evidence, are Ottoman works. That's a lot higher than 0% for Ripon and 2% for Giulio. While I think this is an important finding, we should note that there are, however, several uncertainties with this method. First, as noted previously, the Fihras is not a perfect union catalog and may have blind spots regarding certain periods, authors, or geographical regions. And I guess in the interest of time, I might skip over some other caveats. If you'd like to discuss some of the challenges or problems with this method, I'm happy to do so during the question and answer. But let me skip down to the final observation. One other interesting thing that you can do is if you then pull out all of these Ottoman works and then you compare or take their names and put them into Index Islamicus, you can get a real strong sense of how understudied Ottoman tafsir is. So here, for example, are the most prominent Ottoman members of the top 50 list. The second from the left column is books, chapters, and articles in Index Islamicus about their tafsir. What do you notice? We only have one. Of these 9 authors in the top 50, we currently in French, English, German, etc., language scholarship have one study, namely that one I mentioned before by Naguib on Abu Su'ud Effendi. Everything else is missing. If you simply ask, do we have anything about their biography? Because many of these peoples were Shuyukh al-Islam, so they might have had papers written about their law, their legal works, or other things like that. It's still a pretty dismal situation in many situations. So to return to the initial question that prompted this investigation, sorry, let me actually just go down to the very end. I see. Very good. It remains for future scholarship to determine what distinguished the 9 Ottoman works in the top 50 commentator list. Given the abundance of super commentaries on Az-Zamakhshari and Al-Bidawi and Jalalain, what distinguished these above others? There's another important finding. If you look here in the third from the right column, I put what kind of work it is, and in many cases they're hawashi, right? So you see Sinan Effendi's work is a hashia on Baydawi. Sulaiman al-Jamal, a hashia on the Jalalain. Mullah Khosrow, a hashia on Baydawi. Go back another one. Kujwizadeh, hashia on Baydawi. Khafaji, hashia on Baydawi. Sadullah Effendi, hashia on Baydawi. This is a major genre that needs to be attended to. But what distinguished these works above others? Why did they rise above dozens of others to prominence? And what was their reception outside of Ottoman lands? In his 2013 study on the glosses of Al-Kashaf, Walid Saleh notes that we need a roadmap, an outline for the development of the genre of the hashia in tafsir before we are able to start the task of investigating these glosses. I hope that this study might serve as a beginning step toward that goal. Thank you.